I wanted to share with you something that has been useful in my writing that I think will benefit you as well. So, for context, I've been working on this script for a movie, and though I have character backgrounds, outlines, and so forth, I found myself a lot of times going back in and kind of revisiting sections to refresh my memory because, through the evolution of this, a lot has changed and stuff like that. And so in order to keep consistency, I was constantly going back and forth in the script. And then I said to myself, well, why not sort of jot it down, and that way I can have all those things to reference, almost like, bullet points or whatever. So I can kind of track each character, where they're at in the story, the plot developments, and so that way they react much more naturalistically and do it in a way that I don't constantly have to keep going back and forth. Like I can see the more macro view of all of this. And that's what led me to what you see right here, which I call my beat sheet, okay? And for my own benefit, I've included stuff that's off-screen, as well as on screen. So in fact, most of the stuff that you see at the moment is before the start of the actual movie itself. Now, like literally I haven't put in anything that's the story yet. And that's because I wanted to really kind of define for myself, again, where the characters are starting off at the beginning of the movie. And then I'm going to, in this way, continue this as I write the script. So scene by scene, I'm going to add in a new row and, put in what happens, okay? And, it's a summarized version in that way, so I can, again, keep track of all of that stuff. And for my own benefit, I will denote if it took place on screen or off screen. Now, by me saying putting it into the script, that means it happens on screen. But there are, many things that happen that are also going to be off screen, presumed. So I'm going to put those in as well so I have that clear picture in my mind. So let's go through this in a little bit more detail to really get at the nuts and bolts of this, right? So here are my various columns. My first one is the date and time. So, when this happens relative to the story, and for me, it's a very big sweeping sort of fantasy. And so we begin at the beginning, 5 billion years ago. Then my second column is, does it happen on screen or off screen? And as I mentioned, all of this stuff that you're seeing happens off screen. This is the stuff that's before the story. Then I put in notes. And right now my notes are very simplistic. Is it part of the prologue? Is it the backstory? What is it, right? And as I continue into the script, these notes will evolve into something, more meaningful. And of course you can utilize notes however you need to. Then the next column is character or characters involved. All right, so I write out who is involved. That way I can see within the row, how many characters this affects. And the reason for this is because then the next columns are literally all my various characters. And as I said, for me, it's a sweeping fantasy story. So there's a lot of characters to keep a hold of. And that way, if two characters interact within a scene, then it would get put into both columns for the characters, character 1 and character 2. Now, as far as the color coding for my columns of the characters, that is specific to a story element that I'm not going to reveal. You don't need to color code, although it can be nice to kind of see and track a little bit easier. That's up to you. But yeah, so I go through and, whatever the event is, as I said, so for example, on row 5, it's an event that takes place 2 billion years ago. It's off screen. It's part of the prologue. and the characters involved are Gaia and the Arbiters. And so the event, I put in the same text into Gaia's column as well as the Arbiters column, okay? And that's basically it, that's literally all that's happening here. And that way, essentially for me, if at any point, let's say Adia, right, is the main character of this story. So what I would do is, go to her column and essentially scroll down, and at any given point in the story, I can kind of track, her whole history, where she's at mentally in the story, therefore giving me a better insight into how she's going to react in the scene that I am trying to write at that specific time, right? So, here's all the various stuff that relates to Adia. And that's really, as I said, good to know. And, what the funny part is, one might think, okay, well, this might be more beneficial for the secondary characters who, let's say I don't know as much or something like that, right? But it's actually really beneficial for all things because, with the secondary characters, I haven't spent mental time as much as I have with the main characters. But with the main characters, I've revised things throughout this whole process, and there's so much to keep track of that, it really is beneficial from start to finish. And so, all of my columns really do represent all of the various characters here that are that play a role in the story, right? The story itself. And if I, for some reason, introduce more characters, I'll make more columns or something like that, right? It really is there as a catch-all, this map of everything. And it's done chronologically, right? Each row, essentially, we start with the earliest and then come in, the lower down you get, the more current, let's say, you get. And so it's in that sort of way, it's like a timeline, so that way I can have a good idea of it chronologically. And for me, that made the most sense because my story, even if my story wasn't chronological, I think having that, let's say if I was writing something like Memento, I think it would still help to have that chronological order for myself, and then figure out how that's going to play out in the storytelling and so forth. But anyway, this is, my beat sheet, quote unquote. Maybe there's a better name for it, I don't know. But I'm sharing this as I think it could be of benefit to other writers, aka you. And so I wanted to share that with you. As always, feel free to ask me any questions or share your opinion about maybe how to improve it, stuff of that nature, right? Or how you're altering it, whatever it may be. Would love to hear from you. Feel free to comment down below or hit me up on social media at Svitek. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I'll see you next time.